Are we live? Oh, we are live. Okay. Good afternoon. My interest, I also work at CPROST, which is the Center for Policy Research on Science and Technology. And my interest is in the effect of technology, especially the new technologies, on the human condition, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world that we live in. And I have 2 points I want to talk about. First is a very ancient desire human beings have to animate the inanimate. In other words, to make our stuff lively. And the second one is the animation of the dead. Now the two are tied together, and I'll explain that as we go. So there is this ancient human desire to make the things that we make somehow more human, to be able to interact with them in a way, and part of that is part of that projection is the way we name things. Like a lot of people here own a car. Do you have a name for your car? A lot of people do name their cars for reasons unknown because it doesn't affect the car at all. But that's about to change, and that's mainly because of new technologies, new media. And what I'm getting at here is the marriage of avatars and smart agents. An avatar, as you know, is a representation of the self that's used in the game world or the cyber world to represent yourself when you interact with other avatars. The idea itself is quite ancient. It comes from Hinduism, and it means incarnation, where a god feels that there's a need for it and incarnates into the human world. Krishna is a good example of an avatar. But avatars are very much in the box. In other words, they're like puppets. And most of them, at least the ones that I found, are still images. So they don't do anything, but they represent you. You can make them do things, but they have no will or life of their own. Now, smart agents, on the other hand, are software that lives inside the computer system, their code, that are autonomous, that are interactive, and that are able to mine and navigate data. And recently, in fact, there have even been companies who've developed what look like smart agents, which are projections, virtual hosts or virtual salespeople. So if you connect an avatar and a smart agent, you end up with a character inside your new technology, like your smartphone, that you can communicate with, and in fact it already exists, right? It's been foretold, or at least it's foreshadowed, or is the lead to it is in things like Siri and Iris, which are the interactive components of smartphones where you can talk to the smartphone and the smartphone will do things for you. So for example, on my iPhone, where you have Siri, I can say things like, find me a sushi bar. But it's still pretty crude and pretty primitive because it says, which Susie? And I say, no, sushi, and it says Susie. So we still have a way to go. But it's crude. On the other hand, I remember a world with Gestetners. You guys remember Gestetners? Yeah. Okay, some people are old enough to remember a Gestetner. That was what we used to use in teaching. It was a machine which you made copies on, right? Hand cranked them, got ink all over yourself and the whole 9 yards. That was crude. Then came the Xerox photocopier, then came the Canon, et cetera, and improved. And the same will probably apply to smart agents. So what has this got to do with the dead? All right. A smart agent can navigate big data. Big data is assembled by states, by organizations, by companies, and by and large it's proprietary. You don't own it, somebody else owns it. So you have to ask for permission to get at it. But at the same time, as you interact with the world through your smartphone and through your computer, and you engage in all kinds of transactions, whether those are banking, purchases, retail, email, tweeting, the whole 9 yards, you begin to build up behind yourself, inside your equipment, what can only be called a data wake. So it's like the ripples that, are formed by a boat traveling through water that leave a trail, disappears after a while, but leaves a trail on the water of where you've been, what you've done, who you've known, how you've interacted with them. And the important part of it is that it actually has a trait or a trace of your personality. Because we interact on email in a variety of ways, right? And sometimes you're curt, sometimes you're pleasant. Your telephone conversations can be stored. and they're part of your data wake, so your voice is there. All your photographs, all those kinds of things. And in fact, today, you can check this out on the internet, there is a body of people who are very concerned about what you leave behind when you die. So if everybody here was to die tomorrow, what would happen to your email? What would happen to all your passwords? What would happen to all the stuff, to your data wake that is inside your smartphone or inside your computer? And there are companies now and organizations, nonprofit organizations, who are out to inform the public of what to do about their data wake on the point of death. There's a group called Digital Afterlife that promotes this. There are other groups that do legacy, that do estate planning, how to prepare for it, who to leave your passwords to, and so on and so forth. And what they're getting at there is a new movement in the memorial business. So when you die, you can leave behind a page, which may contain your photographs, may contain some aspects of your correspondence, may contain some of your biography, some of your diary, and so on. And in fact, this has even moved into graveyards, where you have memorial stones that have QR codes on them. You guys know what QR codes are? You know those little black dots, right? You point your phone at. And what it does, it gives you the biography of the deceased. Or you can get microchips in tombstones that will give you the story of the life of the person who is interned there. But like avatars, these are still in the box. They have no personality, and you can't talk to them, and you can't get them to come alive. All right? So they're not really animate, they're inanimate. So if we take the idea of intelligent agents and marry them to what can be derived from a data wake, we can in fact put an end to death, both for the bereaved and perhaps even for the deceased. Because imagine this, today on your smartphone you still have to touch the screen, you still have to type on the computer, right? But what if the face of your computer or your smartphone, what comes up when you turn it on, is in fact the face of your grandmother? Because she has been reconstructed based on her data wake. So we have your grandmother's voice, we have your grandmother's personality, we have your grandmother's predilections, we have your grandmother's knowledge base based on her data wake. And because she's an autonomous agent, she can continue to do things when she's switched off. So for example, you want to buy a car, you talk to Dad, who's in your smartphone, who's the face of your smartphone. You say, I want to buy a car, I got $20,000, what should I buy? And Dad goes on the internet, Dad finds out all the different prices, and suggests to you that for $20,000 you can buy car XYZ that'll give you this kind of service. Or, for example, the phone rings, it's somebody you don't want to deal with. The paramortal, that's what I'm calling these reborn dead, the paramortal answers the phone on your behalf and says, you're out, leave a message. Right? Because the paramortal knows who you like, and the paramortal knows who you don't like. And the paramortal knows that if your bank is calling, it's probably to give you a bad time, so you're not in. End of story. If this happens, and I'm absolutely certain it will, it's going to pose a number of very difficult, what they call wicked problems for human beings. Up to now, what we've developed very, very clearly and very effectively is servitude. We have a relationship with our technologies with our servants. But if we develop personalities in those servants, where the servant has a personality, doesn't like certain things, has a bad day, has a bad hair day, has a bad data day, a bad digital day, doesn't want to cooperate or takes initiative on its own, what then is the meaning of life? And what then is the meaning of death? If you know in advance that on the death of your meat, of your body, a replica of you will continue to live, learn, and interact with your family even after you're gone, do you actually die? That kind of question is completely unknown today. We have no answer for that question. Another question we don't have, or another question we don't have an answer for, is what rights do paramortals have? If you have a paramortal in your smartphone, does it have rights? Can you abuse it? Can you call it down? Can you call it names? Can you make it do things you wouldn't want to do, or you wouldn't want that parent or your child or your friend or your lover to do? Furthermore, it's got all kinds of sociological implications. For example, if I own a lot of stuff and if I become a paramortal, do I have control over my stuff? So do I have control over my bank? Do I have control over my accounts? Do I have control over my car, over my objects, things that I own? A lot of psychological issues come up as well. Psychological issues like, how do I deal with the fact that I have my mother in my telephone? And if my mother was a nag, and that's usually part of the definition of a mother, she has to nag. You know, do I want to say, I want to go to Gopher and see some naked people, and mom says, no, you can't go there, right? Maybe that's a good thing. A friend of mine once suggested that if you are sick and twisted and fetishistic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, maybe it's much safer for society for you to be able to do that with a paramortal or with the character and personality inside your telephone than to do it with a real human being. And finally, it poses a lot of questions about ontological, fancy word for reality. What does it mean that we can turn dead people into living agencies on our digital equipment? What does it mean to life, as we define it? What does it mean to death? What does it mean to the body? Am I just the body, or am I an intellect within the body? These are questions that we find very, very easy to answer today. But in 20, 30 years, when these things become real, and I'm absolutely certain they will, it's going to pose some very, very difficult questions that we are not in any position right now to answer. So earlier today, we talked about what should you pack, you know, when you're moving into the internet. What should you pack and how should you pack for becoming a paramortal? And incidentally, teenagers, 85% of their lives are already in their Datawakes. People my age, old farts with white beards, 12%. And those of you in the middle, it varies. So the question I pose is, if we can bring back the dead or create personalities that will become the main filters and activators in our smart technologies, how are we going to deal with them? How are we going to prepare for them? And what will it mean for how we think about ourselves, how we behave, and how we position ourselves with respect to the world? Thank you very much.